Hello and welcome everyone. Paul McGoldrick here from the Robert Emmet 1916 Society, Lisnaskea, and today I am joined by Barry Murray. Barry is an ex-POW and lifelong Socialist Republican. Suppose, so to speak, now after the dust is settled and politicians' promises long forgotten, as they often are, we are going to have a discussion on the total failure of parliamentary electoralism and what that means for the majority of people, the working class people of Ireland. So after the recent elections, both north and south, it appears that people are still voting for the established parties. So Barry, could you give us your views on this?
Well, that's true. People are still being sucked into the false belief that the present electoral system will make their lives better. And clearly it doesn't. I mean, Connolly stated all those years ago that it was ruling by fooling. And in the south, it's the parties of the wealthy, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. And no doubt eventually Sinn Féin will join that system too. These are the parties that people vote for. In the north, sadly, politics is instead a sectarian head count. No more, no less. It's a us and them uns scenario. But socialist Republicans and anti-imperialist groups in Ireland thankfully have a well-founded distrust of the parliamentary political system. They know from bitter experience that no solutions that will benefit the working class or that will ensure a progressive united Ireland will come from parliamentary electoralism. It's not ever going to happen. And again, to paraphrase James Connolly, he stated correctly that parliaments are but the committees of the rich to manage their affairs. And indeed, the average voter knows this well. A large majority of people who actually vote know that nothing will change. And we also know that as high as 50% of eligible voters on this island do not vote at all. And that's a very large cohort who clearly see no point in voting because they see no real benefits arising from voting or parliaments. So they simply abstain.
So that's 50% of the people not voting. In fairness, that is quite an astounding figure. And even here you have to remember in the north, I suppose people actually vote. It's more or less voting to keep somebody else out rather than voting somebody in.
That's correct.
But what about, do you think that activists can build on the many sceptical voters that is out there? And of course the many non-voters?
Well, yeah. I mean, there has to be opportunities here to begin to build a new people-powered democracy from the bottom up that would endeavour to draw the power, for example, out of local councils and into our communities as a first step. And people need to have real and a concrete say in how democracy affects their lives on an ongoing basis, not just a vote every 4 or 5 years. And what is called decentralised democracy that has been developed against all the odds, for example, in the Indian state of Kerala. And, you know, that's an example of many examples around the world where people-driven democracies have taken root economically and politically. And to have any chance of fairness in our society in the area of wealth distribution alone, our communities need to become empowered and not remain isolated or atomised by the governing powers. It makes our calling for a 32 county republic based on the needs of the poor and working poor feel real and achievable. The people of Ireland must be telling those who are in councils or government at present what they need, not the government telling the people what they will give them. This thinking around all of this has got to change.
Okay, Barry, just even to stop you there. So the people in Kerala and, as you've alluded to, elsewhere in the world have been able to put theory into practice. But that's all fine and well, but how would this type of democracy be built here in Ireland?
Well, for example, is there any reason why the people in our communities cannot be assisted to organise and agitate in a critical and radical and constructive way for a proper all-Ireland public housing strategy, and in the process expose the real reasons behind why there isn't, or to work for a free all-Ireland health service and a free education system. And there's no reason why we cannot build towards an all-Ireland worker-focused employment laws And then on top of all of that, we have a serious mental health crisis with little or no help for people in distress. So let's begin to build our own community-based mental health groups to help those who suffer. This, again, has been done very successfully, for example, in Finland.
I suppose you look at what the average people is facing now, just the pressures of life, just to make ends meet. Say the average person, in fact, I should say even the average couple, they're in debt to have a 20, 30-year mortgage. And then their working conditions and work pressures that is causing this crisis are now, well, sorry, even correct myself there, they're not maybe the cause of the crisis, they're actually the symptoms of the crisis. I suppose it's well known the single biggest contributor to people suffering from poor mental health is the socio and economic conditions in which we're governed by. So clearly this is obviously having a detrimental effect on people's health and general state of mind.
Well, indeed, and it's now clear from all research around the world that the single biggest cause of mental stress has its origins in people trying to keep up with paying their debts and the continually increasing expense of just living. This is what the system we are governed by promotes.
I suppose it's like the slaves of old, Barry, had shackles and chains. It would be a fair analysis to say that the slaves of the day have debt.
Aye, they're now wage slaves, whether people see it like that or not. And yet, in spite of that, people have been organising for centuries and still are. And clearly, they have made change in the world. We only have to look back to see that through history. And we also know that it's actually us humans who create any change that happens. Take, for example, the young people who are organising and raising awareness about climate destruction. The students and people in their millions protesting against the genocide in Palestine.
I would sure even take a look, Barry, at the resistance shown by the Irish people, even against all odds, for actually spanning centuries against British imperialism and colonialism.
Well, that's true, but it will take more than resistance alone to create and build real progressive change that ensures people will reap the full rewards of the wealth that they create. But without practical building on the ground, any calls by Republicans for a 32-county workers' republic in particular is rhetoric. Correct though it is.
Yeah, but to be pragmatic, Barry, this will be a major undertaking, and we're hardly naive to think that this will happen overnight.
Well, certainly it will take time, effort and many false starts, but we can begin to build in small ways our own parallel systems to hold power to account, but mainly to continually expose the unequal system that exploits us. And we can begin to build progressive people's councils, community groups, people's assemblies, especially around the social justice issues that we know cannot be resolved within the present economic system. We must build from the bottom up, not from the top down. And that can only happen if we organise, educate and agitate to do it effectively. Activists have to clearly understand that it is not the brilliance of ideology that people want to hear, but a revolutionary path to achieve and vastly improve their basic everyday needs.
Barry, you've mentioned the revolutionary path there. So even like the term revolution, what we mean by revolution, so what we mean by revolution is the transfer of power from one class to another, from the ruling class, the exploitative class, to us, the working class. The majority of the population, would be fair to say. But obviously this change cannot and will not come about by voting, maybe every 4 or 5 years in parliaments that is designed and created by the rich to serve the interests of the rich. But then again, that said, you have to, what about even say, for example, what about all these community groups that already exist on the ground? Are they not the type of structures you envision to create progressive change?
No, certainly not. 90% of existing community or civil society groups, while very well intentioned, that has to be said, don't even know that they could create the basis for radical and transformative change. There is actually an engineered suppression of any progressive political direction or thinking here. These groups play the part of make-believe people power and are controlled by those in power and are no threat to the existing economic or political system. And it's actually a pacification process to deflect from the total failures of the existing way our lives are governed, both economically and politically. Unfortunately, most don't even think it's their business to create or even be a part of any real progressive change, or certainly not transformative change. But that has to be the job of socialist Republicans, anti-imperialists, and even communists to actively set about changing that deliberately impose sterile thinking. We need to break the false belief that parliamentary politics will bring progressive and transformative change for the ordinary working people. It never has, and it never will. Indeed, it is perfectly designed not to, as was said earlier.
Yeah, fair points there, Barry. Even like say a lot of community groups and stuff, like the pacification stuff. It's how power, in a sense, manages power, and even there, of the whole representative democracy system, what we're made believe to be democracy, in fact, is not democracy at all. It's just ruling by consent. But say even now, why is all this even more important now for socialist Republicans and, in general, anti-imperialist activists?
Well, I mean, if we're trying to build now for the type of Ireland that we aspire to, socialist Republicans, along with others, have to begin the building of a new democratically transformative and thinking nation where people, question the answers as opposed to answering the questions. Over time, building within and for our communities alongside the people, that will widen our appeal to those who find it difficult to join us in our activism directly at this time, for whatever reasons. But most importantly, it will mean we become seriously embedded in our communities and become increasingly impossible almost to dislodge. And as those in power move to destroy us, as they surely will, our recognised value within our communities will be the fuel of our resistance. You cannot kill an idea when the wider population takes ownership of it.
I like the way, Barry, you've alluded to there, the need to be embedded in our communities. But as we know here, many of our activists, we are already embedded in our communities. I suppose that is imperative, because as we know, when we begin to undermine their system, surely that will not go unnoticed by our enemies. By our enemies, whether it be, suppose, the British, American, or even for that matter, EU imperialists. And even, as we know historically here in Ireland, constitutional nationalism, who have always bent the knee to the oppressor, and still are. And then, as we're going forward, just even an interesting point here, Barry, is there something missing in our wider analysis of what it takes to defeat imperialism and to build a working class 32 county republic, a republic that serves the interests of the working class, where the working class actually have control of their own lives?
Well, yes, the question has often been asked, are we scared by the consequences of our potential success? This is a well-known phenomenon in anti-colonial struggles. So do we think that it's someone else's job to actually establish that workers' republic for us? Or are we just going to accept now their new, and maybe not so new in fact, agreed, shared or united Ireland? Is it going to be the case that we just raise the racket and seriously scare, damage or potentially destroy the present system of one-sided power and economics, and then leave the field to those who were in power before to come back and take it over again? Is that it? Why would you risk anything for that, when it's an absolute strategic necessity that all our work must be about building deeply to retain and maintain? And I repeat that. Our work is about building to retain and maintain any or all gains we ever make. That is the most important and the key bit.
Yeah, very true, Barry. As the old saying is, was defending the revolution is as hard as the revolution itself. So, but then again, a very important question here. Where does that leave us as activists now and for our future plans?
Well, in short, the issue is, are we thinking about and planning for what will happen after all of our lifetimes of activism, so that our gains and indeed the Republic are not going to be handed over to some pro-imperialist, anti-working class, anti-Republican groupings, for them to be reinstated in power, to again exploit and live off the sweat of the people like leeches? Is that it? And we have to continually examine what we are doing to prevent this happening now and every day. And that we are planning, building and learning within our activism to ensure that that does not happen. All of this will need to be carefully considered in comradely dialogue with as wide an audience as is possible, so that any future progressive and pro-working class successes in Ireland are not to be undermined, coerced and defeated in the jaws of victory again.
Yeah, well, I couldn't disagree with that now, Barry, in fairness. So, thanks, Barry. That was a very worthwhile and an enlightening conversation with plenty of food for thought. And to finish, going forward, we look forward to the coming battles in building for a 32-county socialist republic with our fellow comrades and anti-imperialists throughout Ireland and across the world. And lastly, as always, we want to offer solidarity to the people of the world who are struggling against all forms of oppression and imperialism. Thank you.